The Devin Townsend podcast is presented by InsideOutMusic, and this month's featured release is by a band called Oukrust, and the album is called The Approbation. The Approbation? One of those two. Buy it if you want it. It's probably good. One, two. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Devin Townsend again for the Devin Townsend Podcast, Episode 2. This time, I'm going to try and interview somebody. And I haven't figured out my camera yet. I haven't figured out my camera angles yet. I haven't figured out color yet, but I'm getting there. And for the first interview, I'm going to start with the most obvious choice for me, and that is Steve Vai, who is friend, mentor, guitar genius. I'd be surprised if you're paying attention to what I do and you don't know who he is. I'd be shocked. Steve has been there for 30 some odd years in my life. I sang on the record Sex and Religion with him back in 1991. And through all the ups and downs, we've become very close friends. So I figured that the best way to start Devin Townsend podcast, including interviews, would be with Steve. But it's the same idea. Excuse me. Going through the idea of what it takes to get into your creative process, what is involved with the creative process from the point of view of other artists. And so, yeah, let's see if this works. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Vai. We're going to figure this out. It's going to be sweet.
Hey, if we can record pig, we can figure this out.
Yeah, man, I think it's a different part of the brain.
Yeah, I know.
The past couple of years, the amount of time that we've spent trying to figure out technology has been fucking crazy, dude. So where are you? You're in Adelaide?
I'm in Adelaide right now.
What's the weather like?
It's kind of nice out. I'm sporting a little bit of a head cold, but
yeah,
all is good.
I was talking.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm good, man. I was talking to a friend of mine. She just went on tour, and we're under the impression that prerequisite for any tour is that you got to feel like you're going to be sick for the whole thing, like you're going to lose your voice or what have you, right? Like,
well, it's. I'm sorry to say, but the other day, a couple of weeks ago, I was on stage, and I was so happy I wasn't a singer. It's just like I was trying to talk to the audience, and the only thing that was coming out was squeaks.
Oh, buddy, I was trying to think of a way to describe it to another friend who was stressed because they were going on tour and they felt like they were sick and they were losing their voice and they were looking for a pointer or two as to how to navigate that. And I'm thinking, man, when your voice decides to go, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. It's one of the most humiliating things that you can go through, I think, as a performer, is to step out in front of a bunch of people and just have nothing, like you just suggested, like nothing, yeah. Right? Well,
do you notice that when that happens, though, a lot of the times before you get on stage, you feel like, oh shit, there's nothing there. But then it comes, something comes, and it's there. But there's those times where nope.
Sometimes, man. But I gotta say, dude, there are times when just nothing happens. It's there's a couple of notes in the set. I was rehearsing today, trying to get the voice back into shape because I leave on Saturday.
Yeah.
To where you are now, actually, and there's a couple of high notes in there that if I'm on point, it's like a really effective little trick. But if I'm not, man, it's just like Marge Simpson the whole way. There's nothing you can do about it.
Well, I remember when we toured, I don't believe there was one single night where you didn't deliver, man.
Oh, buddy, you know what? Hindsight is 20/20. You know, it's funny when we first started working together. I was so I remember as a kid actually sitting around in my buddy's house and maybe 12 years old and making this internal question to myself, like posing this question is, do you want to be a guitar player or do you want to be a singer? And I couldn't figure it out. And I was like, okay, I'll be like an enduro bike. We'll do both. But when we met, I was so shocked that I was all of a sudden going to be a singer. That first tour that we did together, man, I was thinking, and you remember, I'm sure, I was like, I can't fucking do this. There's no way. It's like between the pressure and just the physical attributes. You had sent me to a vocal coach in Los Angeles when I was living down there with you. Roger Love, I think was his name.
Yeah. He's like the Svengali of vocal teachers.
I may have told you at the time, but I don't know if you remember how my experience with him went. We went and he was like, okay, you know, he has all the gold and platinum albums on the wall, and he says, I'd like you to sing for me. And so I hacked out the things that I do. And he was like, and you could just see the look in his face. He's like, oh shit, I don't know how this is gonna go, right? And and I was showing him my technique and how I was screaming and all this. And he says, well, I hate to tell you this, but if you keep doing that with the technique that you have, I give you 2 years tops before you're not going to be able to sing anymore. And then when you and I finished the record, I remember bringing the record in to him because I could tell he was frustrated and he just, you know, he didn't think that I had what it took to be a professional singer. And then he listened to the record. He just looked so defeated. He was like, he's like, people are going to think
No doubt.
you're really fucking good. And I was like, oh, yeah. I mean, that was on
You
your.
know, that's funny that you had. I think it was only recently that I read or heard you say that in the earlier days you weren't sure if you wanted to be a guitar player or a singer.
Yeah.
I didn't really know that back then, and because I thought you were a singer, but I was so surprised at how much technique you had. It was gorgeous technique, and but your voice was so. I mean, I guess you know I was focusing on the guitar, and your voice was just so there, man. I mean, really, I would never have suspected.
Nor I, to be honest. If it hadn't been for you, I doubt I'd still be singing. I mean, I
Well, then I'm patting myself on the back.
well, thank you again, man. I mean, it was funny. It was like I was when I was a teen, like everybody in our age group, man. We all listened to Passion of Warfare. We all listened to Joe. We listened to you and Paul Gilbert and Ingve, and it was just such a thing, right? And I remember when I first heard the David Lee Roth record with you, I had this. I remember even my friend at the time, he got super weirded out when we were listening to it together. He was like, I don't want to hear this. And I remember thinking, what a weird reaction from this guy. But it was almost like this precursor to the fact that only a few years later, you and I would be working together. It was like this weird thing on his part where it's like, I don't know, maybe he had a premonition about it or something.
Right, yeah.
But back
Yeah.
then it was all guitar for us. That's all any of us did. It was such a huge part of my life, and singing, the only reason I ever sang was just to facilitate the ideas until I could find somebody better. You know?
Well, good luck with that.
Well, thanks, man. But I'm sure you were the same, right? Because you sang since the beginning as well to facilitate your ideas, right?
Well, you know, when I was in high school, I loved the idea of singing, and I was in chorus. I used to get all the solos, and I liked it. But when Led Zeppelin came along, I fell so in love with Jimmy Page,
Mm.
and I liked the lead singer guy playing guitar on the side. That just kind of resonated with me. I never saw myself as a singer in the front singing. I didn't think much of my voice. I didn't have a rock and roll voice at all, but I
Mm.
do like singing, and I have on most of my records a little bit at least.
Mm.
But through the years, in reflecting back, yeah, I'm no way. There's no way. You know, the
It's funny.
It's
Oh, sorry, go on.
too precarious for me. It was just too much pressure to have to get on a stage and deliver with my voice every
Oh,
night. I just
oh,
like tonight, if I had to sing tonight,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Dev. I know this.
It's okay. I leave on
I
Saturday.
don't.
Well,
I'm singing your pain, but you know, you figure it out,
you
and
do.
you've always delivered. You've always delivered,
Thanks,
and
man.
man, thank God you decided to sing, because
Well,
there's nothing like it. There is nothing like it. I mean, I listen back to I think it was the 30th anniversary of Sex and Religion came up recently.
mhm.
Was it 30? And I listened to the record, and we worked fucking hard on that
Yeah,
record,
we
man.
did, dude. Yeah, we did. And it was such a
The
strange.
vocals are just they're thick and they're rich and they're on point and they're intense. Still to this day, one of my favorite moments in any of my records is your vocal solo in Touching Tongues. Do you remember that when you did that?
Yeah, of course. And you know what's interesting about that time too is the performance and everything that went along with that had so much to do with you producing it, right? Like I was greener than green. I remember when I first got down to your place, and there's all these video cassettes, right? But
Yeah.
with you, with White Snake and David Lee Roth and Zappa and all these things, and I'm sitting in your where you keep your guitars, trying to learn how to fucking sing. I remember you
In
had
the
the
vault?
yeah, dude. Because you said here's the demos of the music, and so I spent like a month prior to us getting into the studio stressing, because I essentially thought, well, as soon as, and this is one of the things I was even going to ask you about, is it's imposter syndrome, right? Because I thought, well, as soon as I get behind that window, he's going to know I can't fucking sing. There's no question, right? And so I remember sitting up in that room, flanked by all these images of these characters that I had grown up listening to and participating with, and just existential crisis after existential crisis in your vault there. And then when we finally started singing, I remember that first day, it was such a relief,
Yeah.
because I remember you being psyched on it and thinking, oh, okay, well, worst case scenario, I know that I can rely on this and that, and one or two little things that can kind of smooth over the lack of technique, right? So thank you.
Oh my goodness. Well, I didn't see any of that. I just saw this unbridled talent, and I always loved a vocal voice that could, in that higher range, own it, like really own it. And because, I remember you even trying to teach me a little bit, because I would say, how do you do that? How do you get that power? Because I mean, I get to like an E and then it's all falsetto, and and you just said, well, I just do it.
Mm-hmm.
It just comes out. And you were a prince. You were so patient. You were so well, besides all the crazy unpredictable stuff, which I got a big kick out of, but you
Yeah,
were just such a prince in the studio. You
was I,
everything.
dude? Maybe see, this is where I start questioning whether or not your impressions of my vocal techniques are as accurate as you remember, because I don't remember myself being a prince, man. I remember myself being a lot of work. So,
Well, I was coming from a place where it always took a lot of work,
mm,
because I was a bit neurotic. I mean, you see now, like when you do your vocals, you blast through them. You've
right.
got the confidence, and you were doing that then, but I was just a lot more neurotic about having it a certain way, and that when the princeliness was your patience. You really didn't balk at anything, and was just a great sport about jumping into anything. I
May I
mean, really,
may I
really
ask you
easy.
about that? May I ask you about you said you were neurotic? That was your impression of your process at the time?
Forensic.
Forensic. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
maybe it's not
a slight
erotic.
distinction,
Forensic is,
but one nonetheless, right? Like,
yeah.
well, getting into this, first off, I appreciate so much. For anybody watching this, Steve's been on tour endlessly. So he's been in China, Philippines, and Malaysia, and he just landed in Australia. And because I'm leaving for Australia in a couple of days, trying to set this up, because I wanted you to be the first guest on this podcast, which is in essence trying to describe what it takes to create art and create music and the creative process of different people, and in hopes that it will resonate with people who are also trying to do it and say, oh shit, this is ubiquitous, like everybody goes through this. But
Yeah.
Steve has taken so much care with me over the years, thank you, but also with this interview, man. Thanks for making this happen. And if you don't mind, I would love to pick your brain on how you create.
Do my best.
Really? Okay. Well, so listen, we were talking. You were here. You came over a couple of months back, which was amazing because I think it was almost,
So great.
yeah, it was, wasn't it? Because it was almost the first time when we were sitting here. I was like, man, we can jam now. Like after all these years of knowing each other, we can. It's like we're not necessarily stepping on each other's toes at this point. It's like we can create, right?
Yeah.
But starting this process, I'm reminded of how much of the creative process everybody goes through the same pitfalls.
Yeah.
And when you said, the forensic nature of how you were working back then, I learned like so much from you on a production level. But when you're starting a process, when you're starting a record, let's just go to the very start of a process. Say you have a blank page. You finished a record, you finished a tour. Now you've got time. Maybe there's no inspiration. Maybe you don't have like a dedicated theme that you're wanting to follow. What's your process when you start?
Well, the process starts before, in that whenever I'm sure you resonate with this, because I think this is the process that happens when we're engaging in our natural creative instincts, because I believe everybody has something that they are naturally gifted with, that they kind of see clearly. Some people it's music, some people it's cooking, some people it's bricklaying, it's whatever it is across the board. And for me, I try to take snapshots of little DNAs of ideas, and I just capture them. I started doing this when I was like 13, actually, because you can never underestimate the power of your own good ideas and how they resonate with you. So I wait for something that gives me an aha moment. And that feeling. It's like, ah, yes, must do. And there's an alignment of several different things. And the first thing is the feeling of enthusiasm. It's like, yes. And then there's this knowing, I can do that. I know I can do that. Now, this is contrary to fantasies of wanting to, like, being inspired by watching somebody else do something and going, I want to do that. There's always like a static in it or something. But when the unique idea that's built for you comes, I try to take a snapshot of it, and usually it's like on my iPhone or something.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and then if I'm in a place where I need a song, well, but actually what happens is I do this all through the year, and then at the end of the year, and it's one of my favorite parts of the year, I sit and I go through the hundreds of little snippets and I delegate them to various folders.
Same.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
One folder might be, this is good for an acoustic record, this is good for an instrumental rock song, this is a metal song, this is a big band, this is a orchestra piece idea. And then I based on the project that I'm looking to do, I start cherry picking ideas. And then the DNA of the inspiration is still in it. And once I can grab that, I just run with it. And everything really flows then in the moment relatively easily when I'm allowing my natural creative instincts to flow, as opposed to feeling like I have an agenda, or I'm competing, or I have to do something that I don't really want to do, but I think I should because everybody's telling me you should do that. These kinds of things, that all creates dysfunction in the manifesting of your real unique creative DNA in the music. So, like on the last record, in Violet, that came about very differently than my last records because we were in lockdown. And it was just a couple of things. I had some time to work on this weird technique. I called it joint shifting, and it was this one song that I wanted to get some stuff out to the fans, so I recorded this track, Candle Power. And I'm like, wow, that's not a bad little track, So I put it on the shelf, and then other things came along, like the inspiration for the Hydra. That came like 6-7 years ago, and then it was a slow process of manifesting that. And that was so much fun, because that feeling, like, okay, so there's a song on the record called Little Pretty, and this I just had some chord changes, and I just, like, recorded. I'm sitting by my bed, but there was that feeling, there's something in there, so you honor it and you leave it. At least I left it, because I've got so many of them, but then some of them just keep, gnawing at you. They're like, no, you have to do me now. And all I needed was a few bars, and the whole song was there, the whole thing. And you are brutally creative, Devin. I mean, you're asking me about this stuff. Oh shit. I mean, you are prolific beyond, you're like Frank. You're prolific like Frank was. And that you're the only one I can say that about, that I know.
Well, that's very, very flattering, brother. I mean,
But just calling an ace an ace. It's true. You just blast out stuff. That feeling of being in the thralls of creative passion. The right things happen immediately because you're in your nut.
Well, I'm in my nut a lot, buddy. But well, no, and the reason why it's important for me to ask other people is in the beginning of a process like the one that I'm just starting on now, there's so many of these patterns that repeat no matter what it is that you're invested in. And the insecurity, the imposter syndrome, the blank page, it's like post a particular period of our life where that's been rife with change, pandemic, and all the things that have happened over the past couple of years. It's like I'm such a slow learner when it comes to incorporating things. And in order for that productivity and for that creative impulse to take root without me paying much attention to it, just allowing it to be what it is, all those experiences have to settle. They have to sort of, I say they have to coagulate into an identity that I can then draw from. And just like what you had suggested, on my phone, I'll have these little fragments of ideas that might come from a dream, or I'll be sitting with the guitar and then I'm like, oh, that piques my interest to some degree. Put it in certain folders, exactly the same as you. But the process really begins for me when none of them make sense. It's like, as I'm listening through it, I'm like, yeah, okay, that's clever, that's cute, that's heavy, that's this and that. But none of them seem to accurately create the atmosphere of what it is that I've been through. And so when you do find that one moment where there's just all, like you say, it could be like an 8-bar fragment that you're like, what is it about the DNA of that idea right there that encapsulates this period of me and my work, right?
Yeah.
Do you suffer from imposter syndrome at all? I mean, you're Steve Vai. I mean, it's crazy to think, but do you?
Well, I recognize it when I'm doing it.
What do you mean?
I hear there's the ego, and the ego is always trying to sabotage you. You know, it's always telling you you need to stack up, you need to be better than you. This sucks. What if you fail at this? What this isn't what everybody's interested in. All these kinds of things. But I know that in all of us there is you if you can put all that aside, there is a flow that wants to come through you easily and uniquely at the right time. You see, that's the thing. You have to. I've noticed that I can't be anxious about, well, what am I going to do with this? You know, I at first I used to feel that I used to feel that, but then if you look at the evidence of your past, you'll recognize that when you're in the moment of doing it, that's the only time that those ideas will come, that they can really be manifested. And you might get inspirations here and there, but so I tell myself it's there. Have faith in it. Don't recognize when you're doubting yourself and ignore that. It's hard. You can't ignore it. You're going to be bombarded with the imposter syndrome thing.
Yeah.
It's just it's conditioned into us by the world, you know. So when you recognize it's a conditioning and it's not true, then you can be selfish with your creativity in a way. You know what I mean?
I do.
Selfish in that I'm allowed to do whatever the fuck I want. There's really no rules and there's nobody judging me really,
Well,
you
question
know?
for you then. Do you have any advice that you could give to somebody that doesn't have the benefit of having a catalog of things they can take faith in? You know what I mean? It's like, because when you say, oh, in the past, you're able to draw from the fact that in the past I was able to get past this egocentric sabotage. But what if you're just starting out? What if it's your first record and you're plagued with, maybe you were told when you were growing up that, you know, musicians are a lower form of life, or that you're not creative, that's not part of the family. Like, do you have any suggestions as to how to navigate it in that scenario?
Yeah. Try to recognize how you feel about what you're doing, because that will tell you, that will help the direction. Because if there's fear in what you're doing, then it's not natural to you, and you'll be chasing something that is not necessarily your creative joy,
Hmm.
you know. Whereas there is a unique voice in you that wants to come through. Now, there's all sorts of different musicians, you know. Some people may not necessarily work best on their own, you know. You may feel like, I like playing or I like doing this, but I don't really have those creative ideas for songs or lyrics or things like that. Maybe it's you have a creative component that's out there, and you need to find somebody to work with to create that synergy. That's possible too, but you'll know because there's a clear picture underneath the fear. And the fear, when I say that, I'm referring to anything: the imposter syndrome, the fear of failing, the fear of not being good enough, the you know, all of that stuff. You have to recognize when you're becoming a victim of that, and realize that within you is a place where that doesn't exist. And what does exist in that place is just your good time flow, just the thing that feels good while you're doing it.
Like,
And that's Sorry.
No, no, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's your natural state of creativity. That when you find that and you embrace it, sure, there's still going to be torment of such along the way, because sometimes, we express the way we feel, we express about experiences in our life, we express where we're at, and if we're going through turmoil, that may reflect in what we're doing, but still there's a flow. There's no questioning. If there's a question, it only means that the time hasn't come yet for that answer.
That's a good
And
point.
you got to be paid. You have to have faith and trust in the universe that it's going to be there.
No, that's a good point. I mean, it's also like you'd suggested, and I think it's worth going back to. There are so many different types of musicians, and often I tend to confuse the audience that I've been fortunate enough to sort of accrue over the years based on doing something and then promptly doing something different. But as I've tried to express in the past, the process, and this is why this podcast is important to me. The process is more important than any song, any music, any piece of sonic information. And that process is going to be so individual, right? Like everybody who comes into this is trying to rend themselves unconsciously or consciously in a way that can really get to the next level. And I think fear, I find it's such an interesting impetus for creative compulsion for me, because every time I start a process, it's about the things that intrigue me or the things that freak me out, like there's something in that idea there that I'm really uncomfortable with, and not because it's dark or because it's malevolent, although that's sometimes the case. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes because it's vulnerable, or sometimes it's because it's banal, right? But in the process of trying to identify where you've settled during a particular period of your life, post COVID, first having a kid, you're 50, wherever, right? All these things present themselves in ways that you're like, okay, well, the facing of the fear is actually, how do you follow an idea that seems completely absurd in light of what your career is, what your identity is based on, but if your compulsion is to follow that thing, it's like breaking through that is the fundamental part of taking that next step. And I find the existential drama that goes into each record. Now I'm more used to it, because when I was younger, I used to think that every one was like the end of the world, you know what I mean? Or the beginning of the world. It was like this moment and this particular fear set, whatever it's rooted in, is the pinnacle of everything that I've been trying to attain as an artist or a performer, only to realize I'm like, no, that was last year. And then there's another one next year. And there's another one next year. And there's another one next year.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking that what if at the end of the rainbow, you're just not a musician anymore? Maybe you're just like, oh, okay. Maybe the function of art on some level was a need for validation. I'm not saying it is, but what if at the end you're just like, man, I've run out of things to say. And at that point it's a dual-edged sword, because on one side you're like, well, this is fantastic because I think I sorted myself out as a result of vomiting this shit up for 50 years or whatever it is. But on the other hand, you're like, uh-oh, now what do we do for a living? But
Yeah.
it's different, right?
Yeah, I think that's a natural process that we go through, where we can look back at everything that we've done and criticize it and wonder, was that really what I was supposed to do?
Do you do that?
And I think about that. And it's true, because it was what you were supposed to do, because it got you to a particular point.
Sure, yeah.
And there's no mistakes. That, you see, the way we view our life, our work, everything, it's really a mixed bag based on what you choose to want to believe, and what you believe about it will become your truth, and that will become your reality. But at the end of the day, this is the way I see it. you can it can look as though you've made mistakes, but in reality there are no mistakes, because if you recognize something that you want to change, then you change it, and you didn't have the tools to change it before, so you needed the tools. So the experience was necessary. So now you have a new vantage point.
Mm.
And this is constantly happening to everybody. The problem is when you go through something and then you look back and you say, I okay, now I get it.
Every time.
But yeah, but boy, I certainly was an asshole, and boy, now I'm damaged. And why did I do that? And you bring that into your present moment where all your power is,
Mm.
and you will repeat the past in a different form.
That's
So
a great
it's
point.
your now. All your power is in moving forward in the now, and allowing the past to be what it is, because you're never going to figure out what it was, because it's always going to be based on the meaning that you give it. And the meaning we give the past is always changing. So all bets are off on the real meaning of it.
Do you
And I'm sorry?
do you work with themes?
Occasionally,
Mm.
yeah. Occasionally I have this long uh, trilogy of records that I'm working on. Started out with Real Illusions, and the second installment was Story of Light. And then I have another big kind of that's what I was going to do before the pandemic, but things changed. Yeah, there are themes, and things change.
Yeah,
You
buddy.
know,
Fucking
yeah,
hell. I remember when I first heard I guess the first real time that I started listening to your work. I mean, I'd heard the little flexi disc that came in the guitar magazine for Attitude Song and all
yeah,
that. Yeah. But the first one that I really dug into was Passion of Warfare. And the reason why that meant so much to me is the themes. It seemed like what you were choosing to write about was based on something that I felt I could relate to in some way. And when you're talking about this trilogy of records, are you able to go into further what that theme is with those?
yeah. Sure. It's I've as we've when I was there and we were talking about can I mention the name of the project?
Which one? Oh, mine?
Yeah,
Oh yeah, Moth. Yeah,
Moth.
yeah.
Yes.
Fuck
When
yeah,
we were talking about Moth,
yeah.
uh, 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 I just I loved the how excited you were about the theme and the story. It was as important as anything, the music or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And Real Illusions, and we talked about how important transformation is. How uh, any great movie or any great piece of work or anything, there's something in it that is transformative to a new beginning, and a new level. And I created this Real Illusions. It's all about transformation, and basically it's a story of this town with all these seemingly normal people, and there's this guy, Captain Drake Mason, who came back from the army, and he had gone through this incredible. He ended up he lost his son when he was in the war with his son, and he accidentally killed his son. So this man needs transformation. So he goes back. Now he's insane. So we see the whole story unfold through his eyes. And in the story, a guy comes to the town, and there's all these subplots going on with people in the town, as there always is. And because we're seeing it through the eyes of Drake Mason, it's all fantasy. And there's this giant. He sees what looks like this giant church-like structure that this holy man built when he came there. And all the people are lured into it. And there's this reflection pond. And when they look into the pond, they see the different identities that they've created for themselves. And they see past life identities and all this kind of thing. But they go down into the core of their being. They see that too. And each song is representative of various characters and their, because then the story, that's the drama that's involved with all of them in this town starts to unfold. But it's the name of the place is Under It All, you know, and it's kind of, there's all sorts of crazy fantasy things going on, but it's a story of transformation, and I I need to evolve in order to write it appropriately. You know, you can only know when you have experience. So I've been transforming.
Are you meant to be the main character?
That's a good question. I ask myself that. Pomposia is his name, and he's like this guy that comes. He's like a wizard, and he comes to the town, and he builds
Pomposius?
Pomposh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
And he builds this giant edifice just by building the church, you know, and he just by wielding the ether and all these powers. And then like it's like a living, breathing church with all this wild stuff going on. And he basically conducts all the proceedings. I wanted it to be Tom Waits, but that ain't gonna happen.
Were you raised with religion?
I was raised a good Catholic boy, Italian on Long Island, but and yeah, I went to church and all this kind of thing. But I just, you know, never really. There was things about it that I'm like, no, I don't get that at all. But whenever I read things that Jesus would say, I would be like, oh, I like that, you know.
So how does that play? Because it sounds like a lot of the imagery in the story has like at least a topical reference to religion, right?
It seems that way, but I'm trying to avoid that, you know, because I don't want to be dogmatic about any kind of religion, because I think all religions are the same. They're just seen through different eyes and processed differently, and everybody is finding their footing and are doing fine wherever they are now.
Some of them.
Yeah, well, the suffering is your greatest spiritual teacher sometimes.
Thank God, man. No,
Yeah.
I don't even know what Catholicism entails. That's like, I've heard so much about it, but is it like, is that a faction of Christianity, or is it like
Yeah, I think there's like 15,000 different
no
factions. Yeah, no, I'm serious. I think there are more of Christianity, you know, and Catholicism. I never really. Once I got through it, I never really went back and compared what's different between Presbyterian and this and what about that, and it's all these silly little well, we believe in the Virgin Mary but we don't, and it's like I don't want any of that.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's fine. I respect it for wherever anybody is at with it. Whatever they believe is fine, but I never took the deep dive to see what the differences were and what I was supposed to believe to be a good Catholic.
So, change of the subject just slightly here. You've produced everything you've ever done. I guess the only thing you ever had a producer for was Eat 'Em and Smile. Was that the case, or?
Yeah. Let me think. Yeah.
Did you ever try to find a producer? Or did after that experience you were just like, I'm over it?
Well, what happened was I did try, because I thought I need some fresh ideas. Because I'm an okay producer and I engineer everything and mix it and everything.
Yeah.
And I'm okay, you know. I'm not great, but whenever I would bring a producer in, I never found the right person that resonated with what I was doing. And a lot of that was my own insecurities
Mm.
because I always felt I don't want to bother anybody and just and put
Oh,
them through the hell of having to listen and like my music, you know. And so
oh,
I created my own little bubble, you
yeah.
know.
Well, that's oh man, that's an amazing statement, man. Holy cow. That's very
Yeah.
kind of you, by the way, too, because I know for myself, in a similar way, I've said when people say, "Why don't you choose to work with other people?" I'm like, "Because I'm a fucking nightmare." Like the way
Yeah.
that I choose to do the things that I choose to do are so, like you say, forensic. And they're the things that are going to define a piece of work for me as either being a success or a failure is such an internal sense of my own connection to it that you can't
Yeah.
articulate to somebody else. And so, in the past, what I find is I love the idea of working with people because I love the camaraderie. I love being on a team. I mean,
Yeah.
it's nice, right? But ultimately, at the end, it's about how do you find a way to create a team where everybody's skill sets are dedicated to their own little corner, yet you still have the drivers, the what is it, the horse's reins, right? Have you ever
Yes.
tried
Yeah.
Did you ever try to work with somebody who would mix any of your solo material?
Yeah. And I was never satisfied with the mixes.
What
Uh,
happened?
well, what happened was actually I just wasn't working with the right people,
Hmm.
and I liked mixing. I liked the process.
Yeah.
The last record I did was a record called Vi Gash. Remember?
Yeah,
You
of
remember?
course. Of course I
Yeah.
remember Gas. Yeah.
I found those tapes, and they're 31 years ago, and that I recorded that, and I just didn't want to mix it. It was the kind of thing I'm like, stay out of it, Steve.
Hmm.
And I sent it to Mike Frazier, and he did a great
Oh,
job.
I worked with Mike as well. Yeah, he's something else. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's one. In the past, that sometimes it was budgetary issues,
Mhm.
to have somebody come in, and sometimes I've had them come in, and I would just think, well, nah, and I tweak. But I think that you're right. Having a great team, I do feel like that's very helpful. Having people around that love what they do. And
Totally.
when it comes to collaborating, I've always kind of steered away from it for two reasons. I mean, I'm a great collaborator when I know, okay, in this situation, you're going to work with people. And one of the reasons was I just always knew what I wanted.
Hmm.
And another reason was I just had to find the right person. I never could. When I worked with Amy Mann on a song, and
Mm.
I really enjoyed that. But I have to tell you this, and I learned a lot when you remember when we did Pig
Hmm.
and Just Cartilage.
Hmm.
I really enjoyed that. And I think that what came out of it was something special that was different, and that was really a moment of because you remember we just sat there and I played and you sang, and I was like, okay, Vice, step back. You have a partner now. What does this person have? What let them bring to the table? Unconditional acceptance, and back and forth, and how about this? And I really enjoyed that. And you was talking before about, do you ever feel like you look back and think you could have done things better?
Oh, I mean,
Well, sometimes.
I don't think there's anything in my life that wouldn't apply to, but I think that there's so many things to fuck up in the future that I don't have a lot of time to think. But I also,
Well,
it's
sometimes I think back to that and I
yeah,
think I really like that. Perhaps I should have done more of that.
because there's still time, man. I mean, I think what's
We're
interesting
doing it. We have been doing it a
is
little
we
bit.
have been doing it. You know what I think is really interesting as well is like you, I've been married for forever. My
Yeah.
wife and I've been together 35 years now, 33 years, right?
Wow.
And I think that 20 of those weren't like the nuts and bolts of it. I think that a real relationship where you can collaborate with somebody, whether or not it's, in a relationship or musically or whatever, I think you have to be through enough with each other so that you know not only what the parameters are and where the lines are, but when you do offer something or when you say, no, I don't like that, that it's not coming from a place of just trying to get your idea across or trying to hurt somebody. It's coming from a place of, I respect you. Therefore, it's important for me to tell you that I think that part should be twice as long, in my opinion. Or I think that that part there just doesn't add anything to the song. Whether or not you agree is the next part of the conversation. But I honestly feel that musicians spend so much time trying to not offend each other.
Yeah, that was my issue.
Me too, man. And then at the end, it's like,
you can't take anything as precious,
well, and also if somebody offers you something, just because it's their opinion doesn't necessarily mean it's the right decision, right? It's like,
Right.
and that's
But you have to be open to feeling when it is an adding to.
mm-hmm. Yeah, no, well, I feel that the people that I know, and I'm so fortunate to be surrounded with now more than ever, when they offer a solution to something musically, I feel like it's in my best interest to listen, whether or not I agree. It's coming from like, this person's really good. This person's really, and they're also self-assured enough, and they've got a body of work that's large enough that the fact that they're giving ideas at this point is not just so they can have the idea. It's because they legitimately feel from a place of experience that you've chosen or elected to have in your life, because here they are, that this would be better suited with that. And I think that when we were talking about the fear earlier on, the thing that I find this particular process, the one that I'm just entering now, it's like, so where is the fear? Where is that fear? Because it migrates. Maybe it was fear of success for years. That's where it was. I didn't want to be successful. Or conversely, fear of failure, or fear of being seen, or fear of being, identified as being a fraud, or whatever these insecurities that we have. But I think a lot of it now, and I'd be interested to see where you're at with your process, because for the Moth, where my fear lies currently is, what if you don't agree? Like, what if there's somebody that you respect and you love and you are in awe of their abilities and whatever, and they've given you a suggestion from the heart, but you don't agree. And it's like, at that point, I think the process it becomes, how do you keep your team together? How do you maintain a relationship with people when you can respectfully disagree? And on a creative level, I think that holds a lot more what is it, trepidatious waters.
Yeah,
because it's like very intimate, right?
Yeah, I think it's based on the situation and who you're working with and what the internal agreement is. And in a situation like what you're describing, the internal agreement is, let's go for the best thing.
That's it.
Let's find what I like and what you like, that comes together.
Mm-hmm.
So the question of how do you move forward without offending or whatever, in the right agreement, there is no offending, and so much of that is in your intentions in your response. So it's like it's a high quality no, and your high quality no does not hurt anybody. It's like, I mean, it was very difficult for me when we were even talking about the Moth, and I'm like, and I had some ideas when I was listening, and you're saying, what do you think, and what do you got? And I was like, no, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to offend. I don't want to, but it's like, then I thought, fuck that shit. Devin he doesn't give a shit. If he doesn't like it, he's not going to do it. And that's fine, because
your idea was fucking awesome. Your ideas were fucking awesome. And you see, that's what's so interesting. Just even what we're talking about right now, how much we can convince ourselves to not take the next step. I heard something the other day. It said progress is only an awkward conversation away.
I love that.
Yeah, me too. Because I
Yeah.
think it's like, had you not gave that idea that you had, which as soon as you said it, I was like, oh, that's brilliant. Oh yeah, it's amazing. But I mean, I think that's exactly what I was talking about. A high
It's a
quality.
high quality. It's a
Yeah.
high quality from you. If you didn't like that idea, and I would immediately have tried to go to something else, as
Well,
opposed to, well, that's my precious idea, Devin. You don't
dude,
want
man.
to do
Well,
it.
I mean, it's interesting though, because it's funny in terms of trying to teach people, if
Yeah,
that's the intent with something like this, even it's like, okay, here's a lesson. When you're collaborating with somebody that you care about, it's 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 not just a high quality no, it's how that is received. It's like, if in the event where you had an idea and my reaction to your idea was to ridicule you. You know what I mean? Like if you said, hey, I got this great idea, and it's like, oh, what a fucking big idea. You know what I mean? It's like the
yeah.
first thing is
Well,
going to
that's not a high quality. No.
well, that's true, but it's also it's past the no. It like negates any further growth, because it's like you had just
Yeah.
mentioned, the intent of the process should be decided from the beginning. And if it can be as simple as, look, what we're going for here is between these two aesthetics. You have an aesthetic, I have an aesthetic. We're trying to get the best, like the
You're
things
trying
that
to
we
get
get
the
both.
best.
You know what I mean? But I think that the personnel, that's where the team becomes important, because I think it's very easy to find team members that are just oil and water. So what their intent is for what they think of as the best versus what you think of the best, you put those two together and it's like nuts and gum. It just doesn't work, right?
It's like beef yogurt.
Yeah, exactly. So it's almost like, and I was saying in the prior podcast, that it happens sequentially, and it's about how do you identify what those steps are, so you can quantify it in a way. So in one process, it's like, okay, starting from scratch, we have a blank page. Where are we at? Where's our identity sitting at this point in our life? What am I looking at here?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, sorry. There it is. It's it's got a washboard chest. Sorry. No, man. But it's like, okay, so from there, if you're putting a team together, you have to be conscious about the team you have too. Because if you're putting together a bunch of people that can't communicate, you know what I mean, and don't have anything in common, then when it comes time for somebody to actually offer an idea, on one side, the people aren't going to be willing to implement it because it doesn't make any sense to me or to them. And on the other side, the people are going to be offering things that are just like, you have to understand what it is that your coworkers are participating with. You've had the same band now for how many years? Like years and years, right?
Philip's been in the band for like 25 years. Jeremy, like 23.
Do you guys ever write?
No.
Do you jam or anything? Like just like to
Every day.
Okay.
We collaborate, but it's more like okay, here's a song. What do you got for drums? A lot of the times I'll even, I'll tell them what I want. But usually no.
Is it
You jam all the time, every day in sound check.
Yeah.
We have a policy where I come in, the guitar is ready, the tape is rolling. Nobody knows what I'm going to play or what anybody's going to play, and we just play. And sometimes I'll give some chords or something, but then it's all free form. And there's parts of the show like that too.
Do you start it every time, or do the other guys start it as well, or?
Maybe a third of the time or less. I'll just say to Jeremy, okay, let me hear your drums, and he'll start something and I'll say, let me hear bass. And then Philip starts and then we're off.
Were you ever in a band, like when you were a kid, right? Like, were you in a band, like an actual band?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
What was it
yeah.
called? What was it called?
Oh, it was well, the first band was with my little sister when I was about 6,
Yeah.
and that was my favorite band because that was real freedom. That's I try to get back to that because we were innocent and just totally free. There wasn't any my idea, your idea. It was like you come together as one unit and you're almost thinking with each other. Well, you not almost, but you are. And you're looking for, yeah, no, yeah. What about this? No, okay. Well, then what about? Well, maybe that. But so it was really wonderful. So that was like my favorite. But we didn't know what we were doing. But then when I was in high school and I was in all sorts of bands, I got to tell you, it's odd. I've never really had much opportunity or situations where I sat and wrote with somebody.
Hmm.
It was always, it was dependent on me. In high school, any of the songs we wrote, I pretty much wrote them. In Alcatraz, it was dependent on me. Of course, there was, you know, other guys would come in with ideas. With Eat 'Em and Smile, it was pretty much, the songs that I wrote, I brought to the table myself. And then everybody else kind of adds their thing. Uh,
Didn't Billy write Shy Boy though, right?
Something like Shy Boy, he brought that to the table.
Did you enjoy that process of
Well,
playing?
I liked the song.
Yeah,
So I really, I mean, I lit up. I heard it and I thought I got that. You
yeah,
know that it's in your ballpark. When we were doing the Skyscraper record, it was a little different because some of the music that was being brought in wasn't something that resonated with me very well.
sure.
Like the song "Just Like Paradise." I
Mm,
know a lot of people love that song. It was a rough one for me. I,
mm.
I had nothing to do with writing it. I could never write something like that. It's not a bad song, it turned out to be a hit, but uh, the only involvement I had with a song like that was, what do you got for guitar?
Who wrote it?
Brett Tuggle.
Oh, okay. Was he in the band or was he just like an
Yeah,
external?
he was a keyboard player.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, great.
And it's a great song, but that's just an example of a situation where I would probably be the equivalent of "In My Dreams with You."
So, yes,
The
right.
lyrics didn't resonate with you.
No, man, but it's interesting. In what scenario do you think you could find yourself where you could just be a contributor to a band? You know what I mean? Like maybe if you played bass or you know what I mean? Like, do you think that you could do that? Or was that something you'd want to do, do you think?
I really love the idea of it. I really do. Sort of like U2, those guys, they get into a room,
Totally.
he just starts playing, they play, something forms, and then you have a song. I love that idea. I've
Maybe you're too good at guitar. Maybe there's the thing. And maybe if you just, you took up lute or something,
I
or,
know, right? Yeah.
but I mean, for
If I
real,
tried a different instrument.
I'm joking about it, but on some level, it's like your ability to like the character from your story to manipulate these sounds and energies into things that become structures are such that maybe if you were involved with an instrument that you weren't as proficient on, I'd be shocking to see what we could happen. Because I mean, dude, it's like I remember when we first got together and you were showing me guitar parts, and I had a certain amount of facility because that's all I did for 5 years, right?
Incredible facility.
Well, thank you. But at the same time, I was beside you, and yours was just so vastly superior to what I was able to do that, in a sense, it was super liberating because I was like, oh, I don't have to fucking worry about that anymore. Like, I don't have to worry about the guitar anymore. And in fact, it's like everything that I did past working with you, there's very little guitar on it. I mean, there's rhythm, Ocean Machine or City or the first few records that came out. The majority of the guitar is just riffs. And I think that had I not been in a scenario with a guitar player who was superior to me, I don't know if I would have taken that step. And it's one that actually served me well because I think so much of the guitar community when we were kids was just such a cockswinging contest. You know, it's like, and I think still is to a degree. You know what I mean? It's like you see these 17-year-old kids on Instagram just like shredding, and you're like, oh my God. But in a sense, it's like, oh, I don't have to do that. That's great. We were
Yeah.
we played at your thing in New York, your guitar, the Vi camp, right?
Yeah.
And I remember it was the first time, or one of the first times you were using that synergy system. I don't know if you're still using it for your guitar rig, but I remember watching you play. We were on the side there, and I was thinking, man, this guy's like what you do is just so, it's so advanced and it's so uh wonderful that I think, man, it's like there's no way that you could be in a band and with a guitar in your hand and not be like, dude, come on, this is how it goes. You know what I mean? It goes like this. But no, I when you were here actually, and we were talking about the Moth, and we were just talking, and there was not guitar involved, and there was not riffs involved. It was concepts. So
Yeah.
much of that seemed like, for me, I was thinking, you refer back to Pig and Just Cartilage as a time that we were collaborating, which I agree. But the other day, that was the first time I thought, oh, that's actually, I think, a collaboration, because it was a conversation that yielded a concept that we're both excited about rather than like a tangible piece of work. And
Yeah.
I think it's when you're writing. So what are you writing now? Have you got ideas in mind, and where are you at with your process?
Um, well, before I mention that, I would say you brought a great relief for me too when you were singing. Same way that you were mentioning that oh,
Right.
maybe I don't have to play so much guitar now. I was like, oh,
Dude, we're even then. That's great.
that's a collaboration.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, these days, I still document snippets of ideas, and sometimes the idea comes just as a mental story, and I'll speak it and do it. But I started. I don't know if I told you this. I started during the lockdown. I started an acoustic vocal record,
You did. Yeah.
acoustic guitar, and me singing.
Yeah, man.
I really like that. I haven't finished it yet. I'm touring so much.
I know, dude. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've been out for a year and a half, and I got another year and a half.
Oh God. You do
Yeah,
that
so
for me, that'd be great. Yeah, well, I'm gonna
not if I have to sing.
all right. Yeah, that's true. Do you use,
But
oh sorry, go on.
so there's that, and then there's I recorded about 4 hours of my orchestral music with the Metropole Orchestra in Holland for 3 weeks, and then the Tampa Day Symphony
Yeah.
in Finland for 2 weeks. So I've got all this intense work, and it's interesting because I sent you that piece called "Expanding the Universe," and that was a live recording of an orchestral show.
Yeah, it was
But
awesome.
yeah, that in and of itself, I mean, my dream with something like that is I restructured areas of it, and now it's all recorded. It needs to be edited and finished. But I don't know why, but you know how you get these mental pulls?
Uh-huh.
I just want to finish it to the point where I'm happy with it. And I've said this before, and I just want to give it to you.
I'm happy to take it.
I mean, because I know what you do. I know just what you did on the Lost Chord
It'd be my
on
pleasure, of course. Anything I
my
can.
modern primitive.
It's an
But so we'll see how that goes. But that's another kind of a project. I would love that, and similar to how I
work
want to the Moth.
totally.
I love this. This is it's. I've always said when people said, "Why don't you collaborate more?" And it's always been, I have to work with the right people and the right level.
Yeah.
The right. They have to understand it, and they need to know what they want and know what they don't want, and know when an idea comes that contributes and is useful and raises the bar without any you know the ownership thing. And that's something I've needed to get over.
Oh, go on. What do you mean?
Well, the ownership thing is the ego just needs to be superior in every situation,
How come?
and because it's in fear.
Of
It's
dying?
the well, that's the main tenet of its fear.
Yeah.
But it has to be right. It'll fight to the death. Being wrong is sort of like a death. This is what war is, egos that clash.
Oh, that's interesting. That's
Yeah.
interesting. It's like being wrong is a death, so people will hang on to their opinions. That's
Yeah.
interesting. So here's okay. So when I'm working on a project, I can't not have the project uh just hand in hand with personal development. I mean, it's like it seems
Oh, you
absurd.
never escape that.
It's like it seems absurd to stay in one place. So each project seems like the smorgasbord of new fears that gets unveiled after your last project. It's like maybe the last one was like, oh, I was afraid of commitment, or I was afraid of loved ones dying, or whatever it was that was part and parcel with that particular period. But then as soon as you're through that, it's like, okay, good, settled. There's your document. Your record ends up being like what I did in summer camp. You know what I mean? Here's the record, right? It's like I learned this, I didn't learn this, fuck this up, that got this right. But then the next step is like, okay, so what's on the menu right now for personal growth? Like what's the next step? Do you do a similar thing? Do you think?
I don't give it as much thought because I know that the personal growth is inevitable for everybody, and wherever you're at any given point, that's where you're at. And your creative intentions are inseparable from your state of mind. And you've been an absolute brilliant navigator of your intentions. And I think that's important to look back at when you're a creative and you do projects. Sometimes we think we're putting a lot more into it psychologically than what the results end up.
Mm-hmm.
So like you've very diverse in your intentions, and you move like that, and
I
you
guess,
know that feel.
yeah, I think it's about summarizing the intentions too. Because I mean, if I was to summarize this, like, I want to be at peace in my mind. I want to be able to hang out with people that I love. I want to be able to create music that represents gratitude for the things in my life that I have. And I want to be uncompromising in my authenticity towards it. Like, that's it. But I mean,
That's the artist.
yeah, but on some level, it's like that is a pie in the sky. You put that up on a poster and it looks great. But then the reality is like, okay, well, how do you get along with people? How do you navigate the insecurity of like being around human beings? How do you deal with the fact that being on stage is fundamentally just like not, it's like fucked up, right? And it's like I think that it's when we're talking about intention, I think it's so easy to identify the intention in a simple phrase. But I even say to my kids too, it's like you have to really really think about it. Like if someone says you can have anything you want, anything in the world, but you only get one choice, you only get one chance to make the call as to what it is. I think the knee jerk in the similar way as putting these things up on a placard would be like, oh, I want to be wealthy, or I want to be famous, or I want to be a successful artist in some way. But I think the ramifications of all of those things have so many trickle down tendrils that each process is like, okay, so where's the tendrils now after the last one? If your intention is clearly that, and it's just that, okay, where has that led me now? Maybe it's like collaborating with people. Maybe it's being in a band. Maybe it's like not playing music at all. Who knows? And that part of the process, I think, is essential in the beginning, right? For me, at least. With your,
Yeah.
oh, sorry.
Yeah. And when you look back, that's what you've been doing.
Hmm.
You know, that it's interesting when you look back. You said, I love when you said, I just want to be around people I love. I want to have creative freedom. I want to love what I'm doing. I want to, you have been doing that. When you think, if you were to look back and take out of the equation how you what the mental commentary was, you were very easy to work with. You were funny. You were creative. You moved with purpose. I mean, the whole retinal circus thing, it was a masterpiece. Just and I watched the whole process, and so it's important for
Thank
us
you,
to
by the way.
remember that. Yeah, no, it's true. It's important for us to remember. Sometimes the mental angst that we're going through, well, it's always only ever our own doing, because in retrospect, if you took that out of the equation, if it was a movie and you were watching it, you wouldn't see all those things. All you would see is this creative doing his thing and marching to the beat of his intentions.
It's funny. I think that the intention functions autonomously from
Yes,
the
yeah,
ego, because it's like the whole time I always knew what it like through it all. I'm like, I know where I'm going. I know what it is I want to do,
exactly.
but that functions while I fucking
Uh-huh.
fuck out the whole time. So it's like at the end of a process where I've gone through all this, oh, what about this? And is it this? And I wonder if it's this. And maybe the fear is this and blah, 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 blah. And at the end, I'm like, oh shit, I'm finished. And then I look around
Exactly.
and it's like, maybe there's something to be
Imagine,
said from that.
yeah, imagine what it would have been like without the stress.
Oh, I would have slept better. Oh my God.
The funny thing is stress is always optional because
Well,
it's something we create,
it's
but from our
optional to an extent. It's optional to an extent, but I don't know if I'm evolved enough to be able to choose that. Like if there's somebody around me that's passed away, or if there's, my mom had the small stroke the other day. It's like all these things, man. It's like, it's one thing for me to think, oh, I'm choosing to be stressed about this, but that also adds to my mental workload where I feel like not only are you feeling the stress, but you're also not evolved enough to be able to turn it off. I think that there's a certain amount of like surrendering to the fact I'm like you say, I'm where I'm at. You know what I mean? And it's like, and what comes with being where I'm at is that that's still a big part of my life, like finances and all these things that come into playing.
Sure.
It is optional on a technical level, but for most of us, and I'm sure it's the same for you for a lot of it, right? It's like, man, there's things that just are still so intense. And but the one benefit of that, I think, is that without that friction, I wonder what I would end up writing. Like if you didn't have something to really push your buttons, or a person in your life that you needed to figure out your relationship with. There's always that, on a work level. There's always people I'm like, why is this person bugging the shit out of me? Or why am I feeling the way that I do about this? But then it's almost like they come into your life as this inadvertent teacher, where had they not been in my life, I wouldn't have realized that that's a trigger for me, right?
Yeah. Well, once that trigger is triggered and you figured it out, those people aren't going to be in your life
This is what I find, for sure, for sure.
because you're not. You've had that lesson, and yeah, I understand. I think what happens as we get older, I think this is just something that happens with age too. You get tired of stressing, and the stress turns into something else, like uh, uh, your mother having a stroke. Yeah, yeah, of course. It's sad. There's a challenge in it, but stress is something different. You know what I mean?
Do you feel like that changed for you?
Yes, it is changing.
When did that
Absolutely.
start?
I used to been through experience and my spiritual studies, really meditating, and just recognizing practical reason, and also just coming to the firm decision. I'm just tired of stressing. It's not worthy of me.
Mm.
There's other ways to do this that are more powerful, more, and of course challenges come and sadness. There's space for sadness, but stress, fuck that shit, man.
That's
I'm
a
tired of it.
bold statement, brother. I mean, it's like, well, what I would ask then is for for people who are stressed, who are creatives. I feel less stressed than I used to, and maybe that is a product of age. Maybe I'm just like my energy reserves just go into like, I don't pee standing up in the middle of the night anymore. That's for sure. You know what I mean? Like I'm but for people who
I
are
know
maybe,
that.
oh, dude, for people who are younger than me and younger than you, who are creatives that are really stressed about it, like maybe they can't get it off the ground. What have you found has been practical for you to mitigate that stress?
That I don't know anything.
So the concept that you don't know anything.
Yeah.
Hmm. So
Because
how would
when
a
you believe you
like,
know stuff, then you have to figure it out. I have to figure out the future. And then once I start to try to figure out the way things should be,
hmm,
then I introduce fearful fantasy scenarios that I don't have coping mechanisms to deal with because they're fantasies and they're all in the future. Stress is only ever created by projecting into a future that's actually non-existent, and then creating a mental story about it that
hmm,
causes stress. So if you look, I know when I look back at my past, I realize nothing has happened that wasn't beneficial to me on a real level, not on a career level. Career
hmm,
level
hmm.
is fine, but the universe doesn't give a fuck about your career. It cares about how you find your independence, how you find your peace. That's what it cares about. And it'll use your success or your lack of success, whatever, to get you to that point, because that's the important thing. The important thing is peace, inner peace. I know, this sounds weird, but I know you understand that.
Yeah, of course.
And one of the things I've discovered is the stress is totally self-created in the head. And there's another way of doing it, and it's passion, and
Okay.
it's acceptance. And you know that because when you're engaged in your creative throes, Devin,
It's the best,
it's
man.
it's passion.
Oh,
All
dude.
the
Yep.
everything's connecting. The
Totally.
right challenges become opportunities. I
Hmm.
can't do that, so that means I'm going to do that. So there's no, the stress is created by the ego in fear of making the wrong decision, because then if it believes if whenever you react to the ego, you'll feel guilt, and whenever there's guilt, there's always the fear of punishment.
So somebody who is stressed. So say you've got a musician, a guitar player that's watching this, and they're
Yeah.
like, Steve Vai's my hero. I'm stressed. I can't make my music. I understand what he's saying. I understand it's the ego. I understand it's the fear. I understand that on some unconscious level, I'm choosing to feel this way. What would be a practical, like step by step thing that that person could do to try and find ways to mitigate that? Do you have any idea?
Well, yeah, I think the first step is done. You've
Good.
recognized that you're in stress. You recognize that you're stressed, and you've decided, this is a tough one, that you don't want it. So you have to really align with with the feeling of I don't want stress anymore. Because a
Mm.
lot of people believe that they need stress in order to function effectively.
Yeah.
The ego will tell you, if you don't stress out about this, you're not being responsible.
I wonder if I've got that going on, man. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, me too. It's
Mm.
a lie. So what I would say to those people are, you're doing fine. In reality, you're doing just fine. Be friendlier to yourself. Be friendly. All is well.
Yeah, no, that's a good
Actually,
point.
all is well. That's actually the truth, whether you believe it or not. That's the truth. All is well.
Truly.
And you can't believe that when you're in a state of stress, and that's fine. But all you need to do is desire more peace.
Hmm.
And then you need do nothing else. But you have to really want that. Most people don't. Most people feel, if I choose peace, I'm going to lose control. I'm not going to be able to. How can I control things if I have faith in the universe? If I have trust,
I
how can I
understand that.
control it?
I
And then
understand.
they feel like they feel that uh, that I need to figure it out.
What
But you
if
can't figure out anything until the cooperative components show themselves,
it's
and
easy,
everything.
easy for you and I to say? I think it's easier for you and I to say. You know what I mean? Because we've got some semblance of a career, right? Like you more than I, but still, I've got a career. And I think that I get asked by people a lot of times, they're just like, I understand it in a practical way. I understand these techniques, but really all I want is for people to hear my work. Like that's it. And no one listens to my stuff. I can't get, I know people who do painting and no one looks at their stuff. And it's like, and to be a creator in 2023, where it's just, it's just this narcissistic cesspool of look at me, look at me, look at me. It's hard to put aside the need to fit in. It's like we're still trying to be part of a tribe, right? And so
Yeah, that's
if you can't be heard, and it's got to be just so devastating for people. And I think
well,
that
yeah.
go.
Well, that's the curse of the artist, or anybody that feels passionate about what they do. They connect with their creative being. They create work, and this is you, and they create inspired, authentic work, and it's natural for them to want people to hear it.
Mm,
And no matter how successful you are, for the ego, it's not enough.
mm,
It's not enough for Madonna. It's not enough for. So here's one thing that might be very helpful for people that are feeling that.
mm,
Take a moment and look at what you have achieved and find appreciation for it. If you can find appreciation for what you already have, there's no room for then the move forward plan it turns from stress to eagerness.
mm.
I'm eager to raise your own bar, not the bar that's higher than somebody else's, because you'll never be higher than everybody. There's always people that are going to pull us up, and there's always people that we're pulling up. So where you fall in that chain, does it really matter? You know,
That's a good point.
it's
Yeah,
relative.
that's a great point, man. That's a great point, actually.
Relative.
Well,
So
I'm not gonna
if
go ahead.
sorry,
I was gonna
that's
say,
what I meant when I said be friendly with yourself.
yeah.
Appreciate what you have achieved. That in and of itself is huge,
Mm.
because what that does is it, and I'm not saying like egoic, like I'm the greatest and I really love what it. I
Pretty
love
fucking
my
good though,
music.
man.
Yeah, I love my music. You love
Yeah,
your music. There's nothing
totally.
wrong. That's healthy.
Yeah,
You know, I think it's cool. Why would you do it if you didn't? But
totally.
yeah, so can you be appreciative for any little? I remember when I was, people say, how did you develop your technique? My goals were short and simple. I can't do this. I want to be able to do it. I'm going to work on it till I get, by the end of the day, I'd like to do it. And every little achievement, I threw a mental party. I was like, I was appreciative of what I had achieved in that moment, not based on what everybody else was achieving, because how can you ever really bring that to terms? You can't, but you can cope with what you're doing and where you're at. And when you're focused on that, and you're appreciating where you're at, the flow just happens.
Well, we're gonna make this like, I think those are some pretty fitting last words for this, man. I
I don't want to stop, Devin. I love talking with you.
well, we can keep going. I just don't want to keep you because it's like
Oh, I got a couple. I got time.
oh, you
You'll
do.
probably
No, then let's keep going, buddy. I just didn't want to. I just didn't want to overextend this because it's fascinating to me, man. I'm like so. I struggle with the whole idea of the importance that I put on the work, and I was sitting with it the other morning because I tend to downplay it. I'm always very self-deprecating when it comes to things, but that's not truly how I feel. I just think
exactly.
I don't want to come across as feeling like what I do is of such importance that it warrants the amount that I fucking think about it. Like of course, I've got my family. Of course, I got my friends. Of course, I got my health, all these fundamental parts about my life. But brother, like you, music for me is every waking minute it occupies my mind. The themes, the colors, the fonts, the ways this lines up with this, the way that this interacts with what happened in the past, the way this sets up, and I think that one of the hurdles, and this is why I like talking about what both you and I are doing right now, is like one of the hurdles that I feel has been uncovered recently for me is this sense of like, dude, you got to get over that, man, because there's a distinction between arrogance and just, I love it. I love it. It became this real convenient loophole for me as a kid because, I was a real sensitive kid who was hyper aware of stimulus, yet raised in a kind of, grandparents are in from Ireland and the other side was in from the UK. And a lot of this, overt displays of emotions were kind of uncouth or viewed as such. And so from a very young age, I learned to suppress this. I was like, okay, you don't do this. There's no demonstrative displays of these emotional kind of demonstrations. Yet music and art became a societal accepted loophole where you can rend all of this in a way that people will be like they're thankful for it in a lot of ways, as opposed to critical of it if you displayed that in other parts of your life. So everything got hardwired to that, to the detriment of the music for me, because it took having kids for me to be able to divorce myself from this sense of what the importance that I put on the music versus what its actual function is in my life. And the function is, it is the exhaust of the process. And so every record that happens, every moment that goes through, every friend I lose, every, relationship that we cherish and foster, throughout our lives, they become these starting off points for your next statement. And at that point, the work becomes, well, what the fuck is it then? Because I've got all these fragments of music on the hard drives, like everywhere. I've got, like, just like you, I've got the pop stuff, the metal stuff, the orchestral stuff, the abstract stuff, the ambient stuff. And then I just keep folding through it. Last night, I printed like 40 ideas and put it on my phone so I could listen to it. And the whole night I'm listening and I'm thinking, it's all interesting, but it's all banal because I haven't managed to identify what I'm afraid of right now. And until I do, I'm going to be skirting around that lyrical and thematic concept. So if we're looking at The Moth as a transformative essay, if we're looking at it that way, well, the transformation is in process, and it's going to require this creative avenue. It's going to require this collaboration, like between you and I. It's going to require, the conflict that was the last few things that I've done. It's going to require quantifying where we've landed now that the kids are moving out of home. All these things change your artistic DNA as a person. We are who we are, but I think the artistry is simply the process. And so when people are saying, well, what's one of the favorite songs? I'm sure you get this, of course. What's one of your favorite songs you like playing live? And I'm like, none of it matters. None of it matters. It was all a byproduct of trying to ascertain where this next plateau in personal development. And it's not like a choice. I'm sure you would agree with that too. It's not like we're on some sort of altruistic mission to, like reach this state of enlightened being. It's just, it's like in absence of that part of your creative process being your foundation for each piece of work that you do, what the fuck are you going to write about? What the fuck are you going to write about? And so this is where I get stuck, because you write lyrics and I'm thinking to myself, that is a stupid statement. Why would you put that amount of vocal energy into saying that? It's stupid. And so it's like when I'm working with, I've had the opportunity to work with songwriters like, as you have. And a lot of times when we're going through the lyrics and it's like bat, hat, cat, mat, I'm like, dude, this is so banal. And so fair enough. In absence of that, okay, smarty pants, what is it that you want to write? Tell me. And you're like, well, it's something about, I don't know. Maybe it's, and then I find that the ways that I can really dig into something that other people are going to be able to identify with is to address the elephant in the room. Oh, you're afraid of your parents dying. You're afraid of, all the horrors of the world. You're afraid of the suffering, like what's going on in Gaza and Israel and like all these things, the suffering of all this. And it's less so than making a statement about the nature of any of that, because that's beyond me. But it's like, well, how do you face where you're at? And I think the only thing you can do is surrender to it. Every time now there's something that I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid of that. It's like in the past, it's like I don't think about it. I'll continue the patterns, either creatively, personally, professionally, that eliminate the need for me to have to look at or think about those things. It's like, no, I've created this environment for myself that I can function nicely. But as soon as something pierces that, and it pierces it, and I'm like, oh my God, it's a dark night of the soul. The things that I had invested all this worth in is just a projection, like you say, of the ego or what have you. And then recognizing that, the work then becomes, okay, so how do you articulate what you've found? Because in order to articulate it lyrically, musically, conceptually, structurally, you've got to fundamentally understand it. And man, that's the process. That's the beginning of the process. Okay, where am I? I have no idea. I write this. Okay, and like you say, the insecurity comes back. It's like, well, maybe this one record had a song that performed well enough that, you're able to, maybe that's my identity. Maybe I need to replicate that. And you go back and you use the same guitar sound and the same drum sound, same compression on the bus, all this sort of thing. And you're just like, no, that was then. It doesn't resonate anymore. Now, doing that same thing just sounds like I'm full of shit. It just sounds like you are not afraid, because that sounds more conscious than I think the process is, but it's like you are less willing to view what's this elephant. It's like, how do you define that elephant in a dark room? It's like, you got to feel it out. You're like, well, I think he's got big ears. I think he's got a trunk,
Yeah.
And that's the process, I believe. Otherwise, it's like, why would you put the effort into making music, man? If you're just going to say, I'm envious of bands that have a huge fan base because they're just like, yeah, man, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I've been trying to do that and it just doesn't work. You know what I mean? It's like,
Oh, I've I've had the great joy of watching you since you were a teenager, and and the evolution. And so I think the answer to your question is in recognizing your past, in that you've always, I mean, if you think of Punky Brewster, and then you think of Alien, and then you think of all of your records, you are, okay, I'm not blowing smoke. I don't have any need to do that. You're just you're connected. You're connected. You're brilliant. And I read the interviews for the years
I know,
I can
man.
count one crippled hand, the amount of people that I think are brutally talented with a creative vision, and you're on that list. And how do I know? The evidence is in the past. Just look at the intensity you put into your work. You're incredibly passionate about what you do. Incredibly. I
Well,
mean,
thank you, brother. I mean,
I'm just calling an ace and ace. And
it's hard for me to take compliments.
I know I'm not, don't
But,
take it as a
no, no,
compliment.
but thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for everything. Thank you for getting me started in this, man. But that being said, and I'm not trying to stop you just because I'm embarrassed of taking the compliment, which I am. So I am trying to stop you.
Well,
But
don't look at it as a compliment. It's just the reality. And with it, there's that intensity of passion. There's also it's like the artist's curse. There's
this
that.
is why I take it as a compliment, if I may, because I think that the role of an artist is no different than a worker bee. I think
Yeah,
that you
I
are in.
agree.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely
So
agree.
we're in service of something that our role is like, okay, through this bias and through this predicament that I find myself in, my capacity to articulate that which we hear, see, or what have you, uh, it becomes not a duty, but a work of gratitude in a sense. I'm like, oh, I'm so grateful
Yeah.
for being able to do this. So, that's where the impetus for it comes. But with that being said, that's why your intent, I think it's fluid. I think that as much as I say, okay, so my intent is cut and dried, it's like I want to be grateful and I want to be with people that I care about and all this. I think that refines itself, and the nuance of that changes with such fluidity every time you release something, you
Yeah.
know, because I saw watching your trajectory since I was a kid, man. It's like, but I see every record. It's like, okay, so this one, Alien Love Secrets. Okay, so it's got a blue vibe, and you've got an aesthetic and you have a certain guitar, and then, it's like each record that you had. It's like the ideas that you're creating. If I'm not mistaken, you're trying to create an atmosphere so that when people put on that record or pick up that piece of work for even a moment, they're able to be in a fully formed environment by your choosing. It's like I've created this world for people to go into.
And I think that's our function as service providers of entertainment.
Okay, that's
It,
awesome.
I've always felt that everybody, regardless of their status, their background, their I'm sorry,
That's okay. I'm sorry you feel that way.
I'm getting over it.
Oh, good.
Uh, Everybody has some kind of unique gift, creative gift. Everybody
Totally.
has a uniquely creative impulse, and it could be on any subject. It doesn't have to be art. It could be a business. It could be organizing things. It could be laying bricks. It could be, and when we find this, well, the way you find it is you recognize what is it that you do in your life that when you're doing it, you really enjoy it. And there's no real stress. There's the passion. There's no fear of failing or anything. There's enthusiasm. And that is your function. And when you're doing it, there's a quality that flows into it. There's a love that flows into it. And that quality and that appreciation that flows into it is experienced in whatever form that it takes. And this is your gift to the world.
Mm.
And it's vital that see, but the problem is the challenge is we're conditioned from an early age to believe that we have to stack up, we have to be successful.
Mm.
Real success, I mean, there's the worldly success, but true success is and this, it's the feeling that you've accomplished your creative intention, and and you're doing it. You're in the throes of it.
Yeah, but if I
That's
may, man, it's like it never lasts. It's like a drug. This is why I often think that the function of being an artist is just fundamentally ludicrous. Unless you're like for real, unless you are aware that it's like, okay, this is a tangible expression of gratitude. Being able to do this is a tangible expression of gratitude, because otherwise it's like if you think that there's some end game to this, man, it's like, boy,
yeah.
have we gotta,
Well,
yeah. But so but again, what you just said made me think something that I think is worth going back to as well. You said everybody has something unique to offer, and I think this is what I think I've been trying to get at for all this time is, okay, so how do you identify what your unique gift is? Because I think all the fear, yes, all the ego and all these things that go into it are a big part of it. But I think, for me, I started by replicating people that I admired. I was like, okay, so Steve plays like this. I'm going to learn to play that lick to the best of my ability. Or I really love this band. So, the first thing that I do is going to sound like this. But then through that, the work comes in like, okay, so how do you have longevity in a career? This is a question I got asked the other day, and I think that it's a real easy answer. It's like, it's a hard implementation, but it's an easy answer. You have longevity by being able to identify your true nature,
there
because
you go.
you're
Bingo.
unique, right? So how do we
You're
do that?
unique.
So how do we do that? How do we suggest to somebody who's struggling? Like,
Um,
first step,
First step is
blank page.
what is it that you do if you remove all the expectations that you put on yourself and that you believe the world is putting on you, what is the simple thing that when you're doing it you just feel good,
That's great.
you're just
Huh.
enjoying? Is are you playing metal because you feel you need to, but you really want to play jazz? Yeah, that's just an
No, no,
example.
it's great.
So if you take away the conditioning, and you say, "What? I'm going to be selfish just for a minute. Maybe I won't do this, but maybe I will. But maybe I'm just going to be selfish for a minute. What do I do that gives me the feeling of enthusiasm, and B, has clarity for me because I'm interested. I'm actually genuinely interested. And I see this, I see something in this. And like I say, it could be anything.
Yeah.
And then if you can identify that and figure out how to make a service out of it, it'll expand. Because if you find what you love doing and you don't let up, it's going to go deep. You're going to go deeper into it. It's going to evolve, and it's going to take all sorts of different shapes
Mm-hmm.
and challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that you went through that wasn't that you suffered through,
Mm-hmm.
its place. It had its value because it's the suffering that made you finally decide, I'm the boss of me, and I'm the way I feel is more important than anything else. Because it really is, because you can't offer anything to the world or anybody else unless you feel good about what you're doing. Anything you offer outside of that creates dysfunction.
You got to put your own air mask on before you help the person beside you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, good analogy. So
Well,
it's a little tough, and
that's
sometimes it's,
fantastic. That was great. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, it was great, man. That's great advice. Really great advice. So how do you deal with the fear then? Another question. How do you deal with the,
well,
you're playing metal and you really want to play jazz, as per your example. And then all of a sudden you're like, I've had a metal career. If you've been fortunate enough to have a metal career. So then you're thinking, okay, well, in order to really commit to what I think my true nature is, that means sacrificing this entire identity that I've got so much invested in financially, personally, like, what would be your advice to that fear? Like a practical.
if you compromise your true creative intentions, it leads to depression and suffering. no matter how much money is involved. Now, of course, some people they'll have their metal career and make all sorts of money, and they'll go play jazz gigs on the side, and that's enough.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but you need to decide how much success you want in your life. And
Mm.
I'm not necessarily referring to the worldly success. We all need to make ends meet, and most of us are. Anything above what we really need is probably unnecessary. But your true success is going to be based on how much peace you have within you, and that's the barometer of real success, right? What else is there, right?
No,
Really?
no. There's so many people that aren't able to make ends meet, though. Nowadays, more than ever, is the thing, right? It's like I
You have
think.
to adjust.
What do you mean?
Well, if you're making $500 a week, I mean, how can you? Of course, there's challenges. How can you adjust to that? I know that I can't answer the financial issues that people have. We all have to figure that out. But if you are in over your head, and I have been, the first thing I might suggest is take a breath, relax, and because you're not going to come up with any real solutions in a state of panic, desperation, or fear. So relaxing and breathing and taking your mind out of your head and into the present moment is your only security, because with it comes clarity, and it's the only place you'll find wisdom for effective move forward solutions. You have to remove for even a moment. You've got a beautiful meditation room in on your property there, so you understand.
Oh, very much. But
It's
question for
fun.
you,
Yeah.
as well. What frightens you?
What frightens me is the same thing that frightens everybody: the fear of
What do you mean?
being exposed as a fraud, being exposed as it's all bullshit. You know what I mean? Uh, 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 Fear. What do I fear?
So that's I can, because I think of a lot of artists that I know too, and everybody, me too, of course. My God, it's like this sense of at any moment people are going to find out
Yeah, this
that
is
I'm that I'm full of shit. You know what I
this
mean?
is everybody feels that because it's in the collective. We're not separate. We're not separate. And I'll say this, and it warrants a huge conversation that we probably won't get into, but
Sure.
you have no private thoughts. You
What do you
actually
mean?
don't. You don't have private thoughts. We think that
Uh-oh.
we're, yeah, I know, right? This
Shit.
is why in the background, everybody feels if it wasn't for that, we make identities for ourselves based on things that we believe about our past, and in most people's life, there's that. If only this didn't happen, if only this wasn't true about me, if only this person wasn't in my life, and then it projects into the future. When this is like this, when that is like that, then I'll be at peace. But if everybody knew what the truth about me, I'd be done. This is like it's not your fear,
Yeah.
just the fear that is it's the human condition.
Well,
It's
this is
bullshit.
I love the idea of the collective unconscious. I guess it's the Jungian idea that, maybe in a similar, I'm not well versed enough in it to.
I mean, neither am I.
Well, from my armchair, basically, I think that the basic idea, and I'm sure I'll be corrected, but is that the human experience creates a wellspring of collective information that we all subconsciously participate in. So, in a
Oh yeah, yeah, bingo, man.
in a sense, it's like that's where all
In a
music
way
is.
that is so, in a way that is so powerful, we don't recognize.
So, but that's it. The idea as well is that's where every melody is. That's where every song exists. It's like, and so our individual roles is just to extrapolate that information from that collective unconscious, right?
Exactly. And it's all there for you, for us, but we're going to gravitate to those things that have natural organic inclinations for our joy,
Or
and then
otherwise, it's like a confirmation bias. It's like if you think everybody's full of shit, then you're going to seek out those micro things in your life that confirm that, right?
absolutely, you have no choice. This is happening 100% of the time, never not happening. We
How
just
do
don't
you
recognize it.
Well, how do you exact a change then, in your opinion? Is there a way to other than just meditating?
Well, meditation is helpful in the recognition, in recognizing the quality of the conditioned thoughts that we believe. I just read something.
Go.
Well, I this it's something that it's within spiritual doctrine, but I just read it and you wrote it on the puzzle. You are not your thoughts.
Hmm.
That no truer statement has ever been made, because
I got it
on
from your
one
cereal
level,
box, man.
it,
No, probably. I mean, it's like, but thank you, thank you. Yeah.
but it's true. Now on one level, yes, we act out our thoughts. We have no choice. Anything that we experience in our life, the thought comes first, and then we see the world through it. We see the world through our thoughts, and we attract our attention to those things that we believe we're going to see. There's no way around that. So recognizing the quality of your thoughts, I think, is the way out, because then you have an opportunity to change them. If you don't recognize that you're doing it, you'll just keep repeating patterns that are painful.
What's the practice once you're in recognition of that pattern? What's the practice one could use to enact change?
There's two things you can do. One, listen to me, like I know
It's
everything.
awesome. Go.
I don't. I'm just one thing is, once you recognize a thought that is dysfunctional, painful, and is causing you suffering, once you recognize it, then you have to remember that there's only one thing that you will ever be in control of. Only one thing for eternity, and that's the thoughts you choose to think. Nobody can do that for you, but everything stems in your life from that. So here's the problem, the hard part. Once you have a thought and you believe it, it becomes true to you, and then it's your reality.
If I may, so the
Yeah.
the whole concept of the puzzle, which you brought up, so I'll follow up on that, is that I think that the subconscious programming that we end up internalizing based on situations that stem back to just the earliest childhood memories. It's like even the most innocuous of decisions that we make stems back to, I remember the particular one for me when I was a kid. Me and my friend were walking home from school, and there was this angry dog that was always in the neighborhood, and he ran out when we were walking home and he bit us.
Yeah.
And since that point, as much as I know, as much as I can intellectualize my emotional reaction to things, which I can, it's like a pathetic defense mechanism, to be honest, to be able to say, oh, I know why I'm like this because of this and this. I got bit by a dog. That's why I'm fucked. But the problem past that point is like, okay, how do you choose to not allow that thought to enact that same neural pathway? Because it's not just the thought. It's not just the, your stress. It's this whole underlying mechanism that is connected to every aspect of your life. And that's what the puzzle is essentially meant to be. It's like, what's the puzzle? How do you solve that puzzle? Because it stems back to things that are so ingrained in even comfort. Like I think about eating. because my family, we were raised, my father's in the restaurant industry. So we often, when we were younger, when we were kids, whenever there was stress in the family, we would get donuts, or we'd go out, we get Italian food or something. It was like, it was this way to really comfort ourselves. And now you're at a point where you can say, okay, I intellectually understand that the ramifications of eating a dozen donuts right now are going to be X. But I also understand how that all ties back into comfort. That ties into self-care on some perverse level, right? And I think that this is where my question is less about choosing stress, but more about the tendrils of how far that goes into things that become foundational in your existence. And in absence of that, it's the devil, on some level, right? So at some level, you have to make the decision first. It's like, is it worth recalibrating my entire existence? And I think a lot of people would just say no to that, to be honest.
Yeah, then they'll continue suffering. You said something very interesting. You mentioned neural pathways. Neural pathway is, and I'm not an expert, but when we think a thought, it creates a neural pathway in the brain. And then when we go back to thinking that same thought, we don't start at the beginning. We start where the neural pathway, where the story left off, and it goes deeper. And if this is a fearful story, then you have a hot point. So how do you, the miracle, one of the beautiful things about a neural pathway is it changes. They can recede and new ones are created. So the way new ones are created is by, and this is why I was mentioning two things, two techniques. One is the recognition of a fearful thought, the dog, and asking yourself from where you're at, how can I choose to look at this a little bit differently that I can still believe? Because if you say to yourself, "Oh, dogs are fine. I love dogs." No, I love dogs. No, it's not going to
I
work.
totally love them. They're great.
Yeah, I totally love them. No. So what thought can you choose that is and this goes for money, finances, relationships, things about yourself, your height, your the size of your penis. Some people, whatever it is, they've got deep-rooted insecurities. And what can you tell yourself, and this is a process that you can believe that makes you feel just a little bit better? Like, well, maybe I don't need to own a dog. Okay. Yeah, I'm
My
just
penis is just fine, Steve.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know anything. Well, what I would say, and
I'm not going to hit the bottom, but I'll work the boards, right?
I always think, well, I didn't design this body, and I certainly don't recall making it. I was just put in it, so I'm not responsible for anything.
Okay, but when my son was born, the thing I was most shocked about was the lizard mind, was the part of my psychology that automatically switched into something that was not a learned thing. I think that there is that is a big part of the battle, because I think the fight or flight, you don't want to be eaten by a bear. So your body has these coping mechanisms, and one of which is just primal fear or primal anger, the real primal things. And I think that, again, this is where I run into a discrepancy in my process, where I can intellectualize why I do things, but beyond the topical stress, beyond the surface fears and the surface yes, no, maybes, there's like a human thing that I think is much harder to address.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we incorporate that into the methodology of just basically telling yourself to stop feeling a certain way?
Well, you can't tell yourself to stop feeling a certain way. You have to choose to want to feel better.
Can you explain that further?
Well, telling yourself to not feel a certain way, you're going to feel that way because
Don't think
that's
about pink elephants, right? Got it.
don't think about pink elephants. So the solution is, how do you want to feel? How would it actually feel to not be so concerned about that, or not worry about certain things? What would it feel like? And that's the process of choosing better thoughts. The way that you accomplish anything is to imagine what it feels like. Actually, that's how you manifest, to
It's
already have it.
that's a big ask for people who are products of like severe trauma, though. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like
It
sexual
absolutely
abuse, or like being in the presence of some horrible event. I mean, it's like, would you suggest uh if people are incapable of changing those patterns, like, does that suggest that
I would tell them that they're not incapable.
really?
Absolutely. Because they're not incapable of doing anything. But you have to choose it. It's a personal choice. Trauma affects people differently. I was a kid, and I saw a friend of mine get electrocuted, and that created a trauma. It was, and then sometimes there's sexual shit that goes on in everybody's life. At some point, you have to decide who is the boss of you,
Hmm.
and grab yourself, and you have to just decide, okay, yeah, fucked up shit happens, fucked up shit is going on, fucked up shit happened to me right now is where my power is. All of my power is in right now, moving forward, not in fearing the future or lamenting the past. All your power is right now. I would say to anybody, it's within you to find peace. And sometimes trauma is the gift. I
Yeah,
know that sounds
I
insane.
do understand. I do understand. I just would think that there's people that would hear this and then compound their, not this, but just the concept itself, and then compound their existing senses of failure by thinking, I'm not capable of doing that. You know what I mean?
They are.
It's too
It's
much for
I'm
me.
here to tell them that they are. You just have to choose that. I know. I used to hear this and think that's bullshit.
You really feel that?
Yes, and you mentioned it. You have to be able to program your subconscious.
Hmm.
And your subconscious is programmed by the things you believe. If you believe that everything you do is wrong and you're going to fail, then you just everything, you become a self-fulfilled prophecy.
Hmm.
You you,
I
you
think that
have
maybe,
to.
no, I do see your point. I do see your point, but I may have to disagree on a certain degree of that, just because I feel that there are uh, certain people whose suffering has gone further than they're capable of handling. I do feel that, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I
Okay.
agree.
Yeah.
And at some point, if the suffering is heavy enough, they're either going to kill themselves,
Mm-hmm.
live with the pain, or they're just going to say, fuck this shit. Fuck that shit. It's all mental noise. I don't need to. I'm here. I'm worthy. I am worthy, and that's it. That's it. The end of the story. I'm worthy, and I'm just not a victim of my past anymore. The past cannot touch you now.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the choices. Would you agree with that?
Let me just think.
Okay, so let's review the
Yeah,
choices.
please.
One choice is to continue suffering for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Another choice is to kill yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And another choice is to just forgive the world and forget, to just decide, I'm done with suffering.
I
I am
agree with
just,
that.
you
I
know,
agree with that.
but sometimes it takes intense suffering. So there was two methods, and I'm a work in progress, Devin. I've got all the same weights and balances as anybody. I'm not,
I
I'm
appreciate
not.
you talking about these things, man.
I
It's like
know that what I'm
super
saying is
important.
true. Yeah, and I'm a work in progress. I'm trying to walk the walk, and it's working. And and the one process is to recognize the thoughts that are creating the stress, and to change them to other thoughts that you can believe that are also true,
Hmm.
and keep your attention on those. And that's how the neural pathway starts to recede and a new one grows. And once you set your trajectory out of that neural pathway, those thoughts, this is Abraham Hicks stuff. Your thoughts attract more like-minded thoughts
Yeah,
of
yeah,
feeling good.
I agree with
The
that.
mind of a victim constantly, the thoughts are in a negative trajectory. So it starts out with, I wonder what's gonna happen with my salary next year, to I'm living in the streets and I'm dying. So that's the choice, and you and I are here to have this conversation so that people
Awesome.
can do this.
Totally. This is
The
it, man.
other the other choice, it's easier, but it's harder.
Mhm.
You find the present moment. You find this moment.
So, yes, you asked if I agreed with those choices, and I do. Um, what I would like to ask now, because it made me, it jarred this thought as well. I remember at one point I had made a bunch of personal mistakes. I had made mistakes with people that I cared about, and really like shat the bed, kicked it out, went back to sleep, one of those. And the whole process was, and I found, in terms of my own victim mentality, I found myself for years, the way that I didn't ever have to actually deal with the ramifications of my action was to have this internal dialogue about how much of a piece of shit that I was. You know what I mean? It's
Oh, I
like,
know.
and I
You're not
remember,
alone. Everything you think is everybody thinks.
well, it was funny. It took a guy who was a few years older than me. He pulled me aside and he's like, dude, when are you going to just stop this? And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, every time we talk, you tell me about how sorry you are and how much you feel like you've made this mistake and how the mistakes you made were irreparable and you're never going to be able to come back from these things. He says, don't you understand that it's like, until you forgive yourself, you're never going to be able to take a step. But by forgiving myself, I had to also recognize that I was worthy of being the type of person that can be forgiven. And I think that at that time, my thought was like, oh, it's so comfortable. You know, it's like, it's like my whole dialogue is set. It's like,
Yeah.
this is what I do now is I feel sorry for myself, but I don't think I ever really was able to address what I had done. And then once I was able to start sitting with it and say, Dev, you know what? He's right. You've just been holding on to this grudge for so long. You've been holding on to this whatever it is for so long, that during this, you've never actually really apologized to anybody. You never really sat with them and said, hey, I thought about it. And now I realize that, yeah, I am capable of forgiving myself. I really am. And with that in mind, I apologize. And not only do I apologize, here's why I apologize. It's like when you're talking to your kids, it's like, if they've done something wrong, I'd much rather him tell me what he did wrong. It's like, I'm not upset necessarily about what you did, but I need you to explain to me why I'm mad. you know and if you can do that, then you internalize it. You're able to say, okay, I understand how my actions have affected you.
Yeah.
And at that point, I think, again, spinning around to the creative process, it's like those dark recesses of your own you don't realize. I didn't realize I thought that my actions were appropriate. I thought that by feeling like a piece of shit for 3 solid years, that was penance. But the work hadn't even begun. The work began when I was able to say, okay, all right, you're going to have to forgive yourself, which is a hell of a thing, because then you can go up to the people and say, I understand the reason I hurt you is because my actions were oblivious to what you were actually asking me for, to your needs. And by acting in accordance to what I thought was a selfish move, and I'm really sorry. At that point, there's progress in a relationship. And I think it's even, musicians, you and I, dude, like how long we known each other? Like fucking
35 years.
30. Yeah, like, I mean, really, it's like in the ups and downs that you and I've gone through as well. It's like, yet here we are, and I'm watching you, and you went out of your way to make this happen, and I'm just like, oh, I fucking love this guy. You're one of the best people in my life, and have been there for me. Like, even in the moments where I was just like, man, like a card carrying fucking shithead, man, you're still sending me, gear and being nice to me. And it was just, and I think that had we not gone through all of that, had we not gone through those trenches with each other, whatever work you and I do in the future, it wouldn't be honest. We wouldn't be able to say to each other, hey man, like I don't agree. Or you're just like, hey man, I don't actually like that, or whatever it is. It's like, and
I didn't have the tools back then.
You didn't have what?
I didn't have the tools back then.
I didn't even have the box to carry them. You know what I mean?
Well, what's interesting is when you understand forgiveness, it's very easy because nobody can act outside of their conditioning at any given time in their life. Like,
okay, then how is that a choice then? If you can't act outside of your conditioning, how can you make a choice to act in a different way? Maybe I misunderstood.
Well, you no matter where you're at, and no matter where you've evolved to, you're there, and you can the actions that you take and the thoughts you think are reflective of where you're at any given time.
So, but if you had said that everybody has the opportunity to change their thinking, yet at their current state, they're not able to make that choice.
You're not able to make the choice to change the way you're thinking about things until you realize you have the choice.
So the realization is a separate mechanism?
Well, the realization it's the recognition that you're doing it with the reality you're creating in your head.
For sure. But is that process of recognizing that you're doing it separate from the choice? Meaning,
well, you don't have you don't have any real choice until you realize you can make a choice to change your mind about things. Where you let's say you're just afraid of dogs. Now, I know this isn't the case, but
that'd be crazy.
What?
That'd be crazy.
or you're very passionate about, okay, let's get into it. Palestine and Israel. Okay.
You can get into it.
yeah. And I'm not a I'm not a political person, and I don't understand that kind of violence. I do, but I don't. So you get involved in an ideology that you're passionate about, and it requires intensity, and it's you do things that are hurtful and harmful. And well, maybe we'll move away from that.
Well, let's take it from a different direction. No, let's take it from a different direction. But I understand your point. Say, for example, every polarized or polarizing discussion that is too nuanced for black and white. You can look at anything. You can look at guns. You can look at drugs. You can look at homeless. You can look at anything. Any of these polarizing discussions are polarizing because the ideologies on either side are so intrinsically tied to the sense of self, whether or not, you're Absolutely. Raised. Okay. So let's take it from an arbitrary topic, but with that same thing in mind. So where were we?
So there's a certain perspective that we have at a given time, whether it's our ideology about all these things you mentioned, but it changes. And then with that ideology, that's the world we personally see. So we personally give meaning to things for us and us alone. You
I
can't give
agree.
meaning to
I
anything
agree.
for anybody else.
Yeah.
But your meaning of things changes through life.
Mm-hmm. I follow
So
you.
what that says in reality is your meaning is irrelevant. It's not true. It's not true. It's true to you. It's true to me, but it's not the truth. There's two kinds of truths. There's the truths that we all create in our mind, which are separate from each other. It's the reality that we live. This phone means something different to every single person that looks at it, but that and that's our perspective, and that's our reality, and that's the ego's perspective, and it'll fight to the death in many cases to uphold its perspective, but its perspective changes.
Do you think
Anything that changes is not truth.
do you
So
do you think that it's a function of the ego to
it's
think
conditioning.
that the only art worth doing is based on like foundational truths? Or do you
No,
think
the only art worth doing is the art that you feel compelled to do,
regardless?
regardless of anything else. There's nothing else exists except that.
So okay, someone's listening to this and they said, okay, thanks, Steve. That's awesome advice. No, for real. They're like, the
I'm
only
sure
art
there's a
that's
lot of people saying other things, but
no,
I
fuck
can't.
no, dude. They're saying the only art that's worth doing is the art that means something to you. Fuck the rest of it. Thank you. Okay. So I don't know if it was a question. Maybe that's just the statement because I'm looking for ways to define this process. I mean, this conversation is two things for me. One, it's a conversation with you, which is beautiful, but it's also I'm writing and I'm interested because what I'm shocked at is all the artists that I know. We all have a different way of articulating this, but there
Yeah,
seems to be foundational
yeah.
like parameters to the creative process. Maybe there isn't. It's just it's a hypothesis
So
at this point.
what are some of those for you? Like what would be some of the common foundational practices?
In order to articulate something that other people will resonate with, you first have to unearth where you are at your current state of awareness, which requires reflection on your past work. It requires reflection on your current state of affairs with your friends,
Huh?
family, and circumstance. And then I think that's the way I do it. I'm not saying that's like the way, but
Well, I
the
think that's very common. Yeah.
the end result of that, and this is where it becomes practical, is people will be able to relate to something that you relate to. So I think that in the same way that you say every thought is heard, you had mentioned that earlier.
Well,
I
it's felt.
I felt. I think that maybe on a similar wavelength, people can feel when you're phoning it in. When you're full of
Oh,
shit,
absolutely.
right?
I totally agree.
So that's
Yeah.
I think one of the foundational principles for the inception of any new project. So here we are, dude. We're right at the beginning. I got to go to Australia. I get to go to Australia. It's amazing. And but then after that, I'm able to start digging into it. And so I'm right in the beginning of this process now. So I'm thinking, okay, so what are these guidelines? And maybe that's the first one. So if you're a creative and you're looking at a blank page, you're looking at, I saw an interview with an artist the other day, and she was saying, "Oh, I never have writer's block." And I'm like, "Really? Come on." She's like, "I always have music in me." And I'm like, "Oh, that's great." I mean, I'm sure it's all amazing, right? But I think
Well, I
that
would say that there's only one person I know. That was Frank.
who
He
didn't have
never had.
writer's block. So what was his? Did you ever talk about intention with him? I don't know if we ever discussed
Well,
it.
I was able to witness it.
Okay,
He
please, I'd
just
love
did
to hear it.
he did what he wanted, and in the moment. And I think when one of the things you brought up is very interesting is how do you get others to hear and to understand and to like what you're doing? And I think the way you do that is you're brutally honest with the music that is important to you. That's one way of winning. That's one level of success, and the next level is, and this is evident in your whole career and my career and the career of any artist or any anybody that that creative is the appropriate audience will come. They will be attracted.
Hmm.
The ones that resonate with what you're doing. This is very obvious in your case, and mine. And
Well, I had the good fortune of never becoming super successful at anything I did. I really, and I,
wildly successful, Devin Townsend.
well, I thank
You
you.
have created, it's the you have been so fucking honest with your work. There's no doubt.
Well,
And you
thank you.
continue to be. You did, yeah, you continue to be.
But my,
And you attracted the appropriate audience for you.
absolutely. But see, this is why what I was hoping to get at is the benefit of never being like Taylor Swift is that, or even I even look at this little corner of the music industry that I inhabit, and some of my friends in these bands who've had one record that maybe they had a hit single on it,
Yeah.
like, but I never had that. And that I think has been my where the strength has come from, because I don't know when I was younger if I would have had the emotional resilience to avoid the temptation of repeating something if it had brought me what I needed back then.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting you mention that. I have a friend, I won't mention who, but he's incredibly brilliant and never at a loss for creative ideas. And he writes sometimes very popular Grammy music. And it's possible. I've seen that there has been pressure to repeat that, and that is a
Oh my
challenge.
God, man. I couldn't imagine. I see. This is why, I mean, you were fortunate because you got 10 years on me. So in the 80s, you were like a rock star, dude, like for real, in a way
Yeah,
that it doesn't exist anymore. You know what I mean? It's like to the same level. But I think you dodged that bullet in a sense, because right at the height of that, you released something that was uncompromising, which I think uh, was why it was so widely revered, at least by me and my socials, because we were thinking that guy's a rock star, but he did that, and that's fucking cool.
yeah. Well, I think that what happened there was, and this happens to you too. It all that rock star stuff was fun, and it
I'm
was great.
sure, dude. It
A
sounded
lot
like
of
it was
money,
awesome.
all the great. I'm so glad that I had it, and I
Yeah,
went
man.
through it. But at some point, when you have real creative intentions, they must come out. They must, if
Mm,
you have to allow them, but
mm.
they do. And all the time I was going through that, I said, this is a part of me, but it's not me.
Yeah, dude.
Then when I sat down to do Passion and Warfare, I thought, okay, this is the end of your career. Are you okay with that?
Oh,
Okay.
cool.
All right. I'm okay with it. I
That's
don't know
great
what's
advice, dude.
yeah.
That is practical advice for people right there, man.
Yeah. And then I said, just do what you want. Nobody's going to care. No, I approached it as if nobody cares. And what matters to you? And all that music that was so exciting to me, I just did it. And an interesting thing happened. It wasn't the big rock star stuff, but it attracted the appropriate audience for me
That's awesome.
because my honesty, my authenticity flowed into it.
Totally, dude. What a great piece of advice for people. And there's Every now and then you run across artists as we grow that you get sick of things so quickly, right? And then you're looking for something new. And over the past couple of years, I stumbled across an artist who I really enjoy. It's this lady, I think she's from Argentina. Her name is Juana Molina. I don't know if you know her,
Uh-huh. I haven't
but
heard of it.
in a similar way, I don't know enough about the story, but from what I know, she was a big comedy star in
Uh-huh.
Argentina, like she was on a sitcom or something. And she said, I want to do music. I do this really strange loop-based music. And everybody was like, you're a star. That's
Yeah.
insane. You
Yeah.
can't do that. But she did it. And she made some of the most fantastic music. I just love it, man, because it's music from somebody who has a musical mind, who doesn't sound like they really were like technically knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And in a similar way, all of a sudden, that's what she is now. She's that musician, right? And I think that, maybe to finalize this, because I'm gonna eat. I love having had this conversation with you,
Yeah.
brother. I really appreciate it. But
We should have part 2
I'd
and
love
3.
to, man. I've got so
You're
basically,
gonna have a lot of great conversations with people.
I hope to have you
Yeah.
back, man, so we can start doing some moth stuff. And if you ever get to the point with your brilliant orchestral project that you had shown me that you would like me to holler over, just send it to me, because I loved it. In fact, my when I became, well, I guess no, it wasn't Passion Warfare when I first encountered you. It was Crossroads. That was a huge one. Oh, dude, that was like a huge one. I remember sitting in the living room with my parents and going, dude, that there. But the thing that really drew me into your music was actually the last song on Passion Warfare. I forget what it was.
Love Seat.
That's the one.
That's the one. That's my favorite piece of music that I've ever composed.
That was the one. I heard it and I was just like, that fucking guy right there. And I remember at that point when I was working with Relativity and they said, Steve wants to talk to you, I was just like, he did that song. And I remember thinking, when I was listening to it, I remember thinking, see, it's a type of creative freedom that in the face of the success that you had at the time, Whitesnake and David Lee Roth and all that stuff, dude, that's like major league shit.
It's totally off.
But to do that, to have the balls to do that, man, was I remember even thinking as a kid, I was like, I wonder if this guy and I could ever be friends. And here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah, I love you, brother.
That was an example of just saying, the hell with it. It was in the moment, just kind of construction. I should do more of that.
Super inspiring.
Debbie, I got to tell you that I have my folder with all the moth stuff, all the stuff you're sending.
Oh, no shit.
I've got everything you're sending.
Tons more, man. I got tons more. I've been writing like a
anything you want to send me, send it. I've got it. I just have to wait until I finish. It's like touring is.
Me too, man. I got this Australian Japan thing, and I can't wait. I love Australia. I love Japan. I mean, these are what a privilege to go, but I'm so fired up to write. And I feel that until my slate is clean, which it isn't, until these shows are out of the way, I can't commit to like really digging into it. So I got like so much shit that I have written since, we first talked about it, and I'll start sending it. But I mean, it's evolving in some ways that are like, yeah, it's pretty fascinating, man. I'm riding the cusp now of should it be this direction? Should it be this? Should it be all directions? Should it be that? Should it be completely abstract? Should it be completely Disney? Should it be like, you know what I mean? But in regards to how this conversation has gone, those answer themselves in accordance to me being able to identify what it is that I'm afraid about.
Yeah, and the evidence that they answer themselves is in every single project you've ever done.
Thank you, brother. I mean, again, the last thing I will say is, to anybody out there who has enjoyed anything that I've done over the years, it would not have been possible without this guy here. So thank you, Steve, for everything, brother.
Well, the feeling
I
is
mean
mutual. And I've learned so much from you'll never know.
Well,
You'll
let's
never
figure
know.
it out. Let's figure
Love
it
you so much.
out.
I
You
really
too,
do.
man.
All
You
through the
too.
years.
You too,
Support
buddy.
you. I love seeing you blossom and transform and
You
I'm a
knew me when
fan.
I had hair.
Big
You
dreadlocks.
still got yours, man. I don't know how that happened.
No, it's you know.
Yeah, you still, man. You still got it. All right, brother. Have a great night. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, brother.
All my love, man. See you
We'll
soon.
talk soon.
Bye bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
The tools that make this podcast possible, provided by Roswell Microphones and X Vive.